Live streaming for celebrities only, targeted shopping experiences, and anti-drone warfare. Tech News Tonight is next.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Tonight, episode 396 for Wednesday, August 5th, 2015. This episode is brought to you by Intel. Small business owners can't afford to choose between A or B. If both help your business, you want A and B. With Intel-powered 2-in-1s, you get performance and mobility, power and freedom. That's the power of and. Experience it at smallbusiness.intel.com. Welcome. I am Megan Maroney. Let's get into today's big news. Yesterday, I told you about a zero-day flaw that could allow root access to your Mac. And right now, there's no fix for it. Later on in the show, I'm going to talk to Renee Ritchie about whether Mac users really need to worry. But first, the headlines. Facebook announced that they're creating a new live streaming service like Periscope and Meerkat, but this one is only for celebrities. As well it should be. Nobody needs to see me eating my lunch. Facebook says that starting today, public figures can share live video from Facebook Mentions, the app that makes it easy for athletes, musicians, politicians, and other influencers to talk with their fans and each other. The service is called Live, and The Rock and Serena Williams have already recorded themselves eating lunch today. If you didn't catch it live, it's up there on Facebook forever. Social networking site Reddit has banned some of its most offensive racist communities. Ellen Powell's successor, CEO Steve Huffman, posted a content policy update today on Reddit. The change was proposed in July and includes a series of bans, including r/Coontown, one of the most hateful white supremacist subreddits. This marks a sea change at Reddit, the company that's been known for avoiding bans on hate communities on the grounds that they had not violated any of the site's official rules. Yesterday, we told you that Netflix had announced a year-long paternity and maternity leave policy where employees could come back when they wanted, part-time or full-time, and still get paid for an entire year. This policy amazes me. I guess a lot has changed since 12 years ago when I took my first maternity leave. I'm looking at you, Tech TV, who would not let me come back part-time. Today, Microsoft released a statement that they'd also be aligning their benefits policies with their culture. The official Microsoft blog says that U.S. employees are now eligible for 12 weeks of parental leave, paid at 100% for all mothers and fathers of new children. For birth mothers, this is in addition to the 8 weeks of maternity disability leave they currently receive, paid at 100%. Do you want Target to know exactly where you are in their store at all times? Pretty creepy, right? What if they could push coupons to you based on what you've previously purchased and show you exactly where that item is in the store so you don't have to waste time searching around for it? Like most new technology that tracks us, I care a little less about how creepy it is if it saves me time and money. On their corporate blog today, Target announced that they're testing beacon technology in 50 locations in the U.S. Now, beacons are small Bluetooth-enabled devices placed in various locations around stores. Beacons transmit signals to your smartphone, and when you're opted in, they deliver ads, coupons, and other content. Right now, this creepy but super useful technology is available only to iPhone users, but Android support is on the way. If you've been considering whether or not it's legal to shoot your neighbor's drone out of the sky if it hovers over your backyard, please stop. There is a better way. The Stack reports that scientists at the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology have proven that noise can knock drones out of the air in mid-flight. No, you cannot just scream loud at them unless your voice is very, very loud. According to the report entitled "Rocking Drones with Intentional Sound Noise on Gyroscopic Sensors," the sound must match the natural resonant frequency of the drone's gyroscope, resulting in erroneous flight outputs. Scientists used a small, commercially available speaker that they controlled from a remote laptop. When they played the correct frequency, the drone would fall to the ground. If you're the guy flying your drone over your neighbor's yard and worried about him messing with it, the Stack says you could insulate the gyroscope using a good casing, shielding, or foam. Let the battle begin. Coming up, malware sequels and how vulnerable is my Mac. But first, for small business owners, there's no room for compromise. You can't afford to choose between A or B. If both will help your business, you want A and B. With Intel-powered 2-in-1s, you don't have to choose between a laptop or a tablet. You get both. Powered by Intel's latest family of core processors, you can impress clients at the touch of a tablet and handle robust programs on the go. You can do it right, and you can do it right now. That's a better way to work. That's the power of and. Experience it at smallbusiness.intel.com. Intel Power 2-in-1s give you laptop performance and power as well as tablet mobility. You get maximum versatility, amazing battery life, peak performance for business, and great built-in graphics. With 5th-generation Intel Core processor-based laptops, you can run business applications up to 2.5 times faster than on a 4-year-old laptop. Experience the power of and. Visit smallbusiness.intel.com and find out how Intel-powered 2-in-1s can improve your small business. That's smallbusiness.intel.com, and we thank Intel for their support of this show. Yesterday, I talked about a 0-day vulnerability for Macs that was reported by Malware. Now there are 2 Mac security risks being bandied about in the tech news. The other is Thunderstrike 2, which was reported in Wired this week. My guest, Renee Ritchie, editor-in-chief at iMore, says that while a lot of this is just sensationalist reporting, there are a few things that every Mac user needs to know. Welcome, Renee.
Hi, Megan. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for coming back on the show. Let's start with Thunderstrike 2. I really want this to be an Xbox game, but it is not. It's a worm that uses security holes in the firmware on your Mac to inject malicious code into the boot process. This sounds very, very scary. Is it?
So, I mean, a lot of these things sound scary, but they're either theoretical or they're proof of concepts or they're something that most human beings just will never come into contact with. So they're super important to know about, especially if you are someone who uses the type of equipment that the exploit affects. But most people day to day, there's very little that you have to worry about on top of it. Like the kind of stuff Steve Gibson always talks about that are good security practices. And the fact that most people aren't a target for these kinds of things sort of makes the threat level minimal for most people.
So if you follow those good practices, don't download, don't open attachments, don't click on weird links, don't visit sites that you trust, those kinds of things?
Yeah, so I mean, if you could get rid of the humans, almost every system would be secure. It's really us, and there's things like social engineering or phishing scams, and they get us to put in our passwords for them. It's that old joke, the best way to get a password from someone is just to ask for it. So we're really the biggest exploit. And once you start having good habits and good behavior, it makes everything else just that much more secure.
So these things are scary because, I mean, they're theoretical, but the idea is that if you get this kind of worm, it can't be seen by antivirus software, and you can't get rid of it because it's already into the boot process. Is that why it's so scary?
Yeah, so I mean, it's scary mostly because of the way that they phrase it, and this is where I find that journalism is in their efforts to make things exciting, they sort of do us a disservice. So one of the big things they harped about is that you don't need to be on the internet to get it, and that's because it actually can infect the firmware in an accessory like a Thunderbolt device. It'll go in there and infect that firmware, and then if you take a Thunderbolt adapter out of one infected Mac and put it into an uninfected Mac, it'll infect that Mac. So it's like sneakernet, people walking around the office, passing around accessories, infecting each other's computers. That's no more scary than the internet. It means that people who have air-gapped computers that are deliberately not attached to a network and not online, that in and of itself is not secure. But if a virus was just, if a worm was just sneakernet based and not online based, you wouldn't be any safer either. So it's not so much the details, it's the way that they phrase them that I think makes people sort of more scared than they need to be.
Right. And I mean, are there people that aren't on the internet? Is that a thing that still exists somewhere?
Well, so one of the common security practices, if you're worried about online viruses, things like malware, if you're worried about people trying to steal your information, is you might have a computer that's completely separate, that doesn't have any connection to the internet, so that no one can do a remote exploit, can actually go into that computer through the internet, gain access and start taking your information or planting viruses or doing anything else. You might deliberately take it offline. And this is a kind of exploit that doesn't matter if you're online or not. If you're not in the habit of plugging Thunderbolt devices in, you're still absolutely safe. But if you are in the habit of plugging Thunderbolt devices in, then it's an additional factor you've got to worry about.
So has this been patched, or do you think that Apple will patch this anytime soon?
Yeah, so one of the things that's interesting now is that we're moving sort of beyond just a patch-based system. The problem with patches is when an exploit is found, it's once they've identified the exploit, that's something, but it's not everything. They have to find out what's causing the exploit. They have to figure out how to fix it. And they have to figure out how not to break anything else, because there might be code that's being written based on this exploit, or that is based on behavior that exists because of the exploit. And they have to make sure they don't break anything else when they're fixing it. They have to test it. And when you're dealing with something as big as iOS or OS X or Android or Windows, that can be a lot of work for a lot of people. So what they're trying to do is sort of forward security. They're making sure right now with this, they've already stopped the malware that was being downloaded not on this virus particularly, but on the other one, but it applies to all situations. They can revoke the certificates for apps that are trying to put junkware on your computer. And that means that Gatekeeper, one of the technologies built into your Mac, will come up and say, this is not a trusted thing. Are you sure you want to install this? Or depending on your settings, will just prevent you from installing it altogether. They can also add the digital signature of the software, of the junkware or the malware, to the automatic anti-malware program on OS X, and that'll prevent it from being downloaded regardless of your settings. And there's various things they're doing also, like coming in OS X El Capitan is something called system integrity protection, which means that even if one of these things gets onto your computer and escalates itself to root, there's very little damage it can do, because root in and of itself is not enough to gain complete access to your system anymore. And then there's things like they make the Mac App Store, so you're downloading from safe sources, and it's really like a 4 or 5 stage approach now, with the server-side stuff happening as fast as possible, and then the patches coming when they're ready.
So it's not so simple as just like, here's this vulnerability, let's just wait for the patch. It's much more complicated than that at this point.
Yeah, and also a lot of people don't patch immediately. Like, some people are in production environments and they're worried that if they apply this patch, it might break something else, or the software they're using hasn't been updated to go. So it's really, you can't wait on patches anymore. And the systems have to become smart enough to defend us regardless of the patch state or not. The patch is still the best thing, but in the meantime, we have to have other protections.
So let's move on to the other vulnerability, the DYLD print-a-file, that has a much less interesting name than Thunderstrike 2. Is this essentially the same thing? Do I need to worry about it?
Yeah, so DYLD is a privileged escalation bug. So that means if you already have something on your computer, some malware, it can use this to escalate to root, which again gives it the ability to start reading and writing files and doing other things to your system. Things like system integrity protection coming in El Capitan will prevent it from doing as much damage as it can now in that situation, but you still have to be infected already for this to work. Apple had patched this. Basically, it was discovered and then someone else decided to make it public. Apple has it patched in the upcoming betas for 10.10.5. It's already patched in the El Capitan betas. It's had the malware again. It's had its certificates revoked. Its fingerprints have been matched against the anti-malware software. So a lot of things have happened already. And again, for most people, if you're not just clicking on links, downloading, a lot of this stuff gets on because, oh, Photoshop for free. Why should I pay Adobe? I'll just get it from this sketchy site. And oh, by the way, or Flash is a big one. Downloading Flash from third-party sites and it's bundled in sort of malware. So if you're doing good practices, your chance of encountering this in the wild is minimal.
So now, as Mac users, we have been, practicing saying like, well, I use a Mac. I don't need, that's my antivirus software. I don't need, it's not a problem. Malware isn't a problem on the Mac. Is that still true?
So malware is a really big term and encompasses a lot of things. The Mac is based on Unix, and for a while it was thought that Unix had a really good protection, and it does, but it also had a much smaller target than Windows. It was just much more efficient and economical to target Windows-based systems. But there's been junkware, adware, and all sorts of crapware, basically, that's been on Mac for a while. Things that try to do clean up your Mac and offer you all sorts of services, and really they are just junk. So the recommendation has been to practice safe internet browsing, not to click on links, things that could be phishing scams, things that could be look like free games, free copies of pirated games or pirated app stores. Things like that have always been dangerous. The Mac is pretty good because you need to typically type in your admin password to do that, but you can trick people into doing that by offering them something that looks really tempting to them. So it's never been 100% safe. It does have a fairly good record. Apple is fairly good at patching these things, but I would just, again, I'm going to go back to Steve Gibson and say, don't trust anybody and don't trust anything, and always be safe.
So do you run antivirus software on your computers?
I don't. And this might be controversial, but I don't believe it's the job of third parties to provide anti-spyware, anti-virus software. I believe the stuff that they make is often just as bad as the viruses, and the sort of access that they want is you can't just allow antivirus to have the deep sort of access that they want to have without also letting bad guys in. It's the same thing as saying the government saying we want to have backdoor access and thinking that no one else will ever find this way in. So when you have antivirus software, it typically bogs down your machine. It opens up doors that you don't want to have opened. I really believe it's Apple's job and Microsoft's job and Google's job to do this. It has to be part of the operating system, and they're under the most scrutiny because they're the ones that have the highest stakes in this. If their software gets compromised, it's their reputation. And I always want the person who has the most to lose to be the one fighting this battle for me.
Right, and we started this conversation talking about sensationalist journalism, and a lot of times these threats are stories that start with a PR person from an antivirus company.
I got mail just yesterday from the PR person from an antivirus software offering me an expert to talk to me about a story that they'd written on their blog, which like to me, there's a certain point where it actually becomes not just bad journalism, but damaging journalism. And like my mom will call me and she'll say, I just heard on the BBC that people can spy on your iPhone. And they didn't bother to say, yes, if your iPhone is jailbroken and you're going to a pirated app store and you download this Debian bundle and you ignore Apple's "this is not trusted" thing twice, and then you do these other 3 steps, that they can get spyware on your thing. But it's nothing that she would ever have to worry about. And now she's in a high stress state. And the biggest problem with it is when you start saying that everything is bad, you lose the ability to inform people when something really is. So if there really was a zero-day exploit in the wild that had a higher probability of infecting an average person and doing real damage to their system, there's just so much noise out there that it's hard to tell how much we'd actually believe it anymore.
Well, Renee, thank you so much for joining us. Renee Ritchie is editor-in-chief at iMore. He is the host of MacBreak Weekly here on Twit on Tuesdays and a whole host of other podcasts on iMore. Thank you so much for joining us, Renee.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Take care.
You too.
And finally, earlier this week, we told you about HitchBOT, the hitchhiking robot who was destroyed beyond repair by vandals in Philadelphia, of all places. We told you that offers to help rebuild HitchBOT were pouring in, and now Mashable reports that the creators of the rain boot-wearing robot might consider starting over. HitchBOT's creators told Lance Ulanoff that they will not try to investigate who killed HitchBOT, but they might consider returning HitchBOT to Philadelphia in 2016. The robot has a lot left on his bucket list. And that is it for this edition of Tech News Tonight. We're on Facebook at Tech News Tonight. Use the number 2. You can like us to get links to the show when it's posted, and we also post the stories that we are talking about. And if you want to be part of the conversation, post a comment on the stories we post, and we will read them right here on the show. You can subscribe to the show at twit.tv/TN2. You can write to us at tn2@twit.tv, and you can watch live every weekday at 4 p.m. Pacific. And don't miss our morning news program, Tech News Today, every weekday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm Megan Maroney. Thanks for watching.
Bandwidth for Tech News Tonight is brought to you by CashFly.com.